Rank 1, a body in the room. You're 22 and have been living in Los Angeles for a year and a half. You moved here from Dayton, Ohio, because there's nothing to do in Dayton, whereas in Los Angeles it's at least warm, and you get the feeling that something might happen here. Nothing has started yet. You work as a barista on Sunset Boulevard, live in a studio on Fontaine Avenue, where the stove is a meter from the bed, and there's only one closet for everything. Your father left when you were 14. Your mother raised you and your sister on her own, and you left not to chase a dream, but because you couldn't stand watching her grow old at the Kroger checkout. On Saturday afternoon on Hollywood Boulevard, a girl with a tablet approaches you and asks if you have 40 minutes for a free personality test. You agree because you have nothing else to do on Saturday. 200 questions. Does music evoke a strong emotional response in you? Do you often flip through reference books just for the sake of it? Do your muscles ever twitch for no reason? 40 minutes later, you're led into a building on Ron Hubbard Way, and seated in a windowless room where a man in his mid-30s places a sheet with a 10-line graph in front of you, each line representing a personality trait. 3 are below the middle: stability, confidence, and communication skills. The man doesn't pressure you or try to sell you anything. He asks, "What do you think? Does this sound like you?" And you say yes because it's true. The communication course costs $650. You think about it for 3 days, and then you pay because $650 isn't a big deal. But the feeling that for the first time in your life, you've been asked the right question won't go away. On the first evening, they seat you in a chair in a room where 15 pairs are sitting across from each other, and the instructor says, "Close your eyes, sit still, don't talk." After 20 minutes, your face starts to itch. After 40, your legs go numb, and after an hour, you lose track of time. The next stage, eyes open. You look at your partner, and they look at you. You can't blink, you can't move, you can't look away, and if you blink, the instructor comes over and says, "You failed the test, start over." By the end of the second hour, something changes, and you can't put your finger on it. The boundary between you and the person across from you doesn't disappear, but it grows thinner, as if the wall had turned to glass. Then, bull baiting. Your partner says anything and everything that might hurt you right to your face, yells, insults, provokes, and you sit there and don't react, and if you flinch, start over. 4 hours. On Monday, you show up for your shift, and the coffee shop manager starts his usual rant about the cleanliness of the coffee machine. But you look at him calmly, directly, without interrupting or looking away, and he stumbles over his words. By Friday, he makes you shift supervisor. That's an extra $200 a month. You ask the instructor what's going on, and he replies, "This is the first level, the lowest one. Don't even ask yet what comes next." You buy Dianetics and read until 4 in the morning, and the book does what no textbook and no therapist ever did. It explains the whole world through a single system: why people get sick, why they're afraid, why they fight, and there's only one reason for all of it, and that reason can be removed. Rank 2, clear. The first auditing session, a small room, 2 chairs, a table with an e-meter. The device is the size of a shoebox, with a dial and a needle, 2 wires leading to metal cylinders that you hold in your hands like 2 glasses. Across from you is the auditor, a woman in her 40s with a soft voice. She asks a question, the same one, and waits. Think of a time when you were hurt. You talk about school. The needle moves. One more time, in more detail. One more time. On the 6th try, you talk about your father, how he stood in the doorway with a bag, how your mother sat in the kitchen and didn't turn around, how you stood in the hallway and couldn't go in or leave. The needle settles. The auditor says, "Good." When you leave, it's genuinely easier, like after an illness, when the fever has finally broken. Grades range from 0 to 4, and each one gives you a specific thing. After 0, you meet a girl at a bar on Vermont, and for the first time in your life, you say what you want to say, without pausing and without any nonsense, and she looks at you as if you're the only person in the room who knows how to talk. An hour later, you leave together. After the first grade, you quit your job at the coffee shop and get hired at a real estate agency. A guy from the organization who works in real estate takes you on because you know how to talk to people in a way that makes them trust you. 3 months later, you close your first deal. 6 months later, the second and third. By the end of the year, you're making more money than your mother has ever seen in one place in her entire life. It all started with 2 chairs in a room on Hubbard Way. And if the lower levels gave you this, what's in store for the upper levels? You're learning a language that only your own kind understand. Thetan, Ingram, suppressive personality. You're surrounded by people who speak this language, and they're successful. Real estate agents, business owners, producers. This isn't a cult of destitute fanatics. It's a club of people who know how to get things done. Your mother calls and says she's worried, but you hear a pattern of suppression in her voice and calmly warn her, if she keeps pressuring me, I'll have to stop talking to her. But the main thing is, you see people who have gone further up the bridge, and when you ask what's up there, they don't answer. They just say, you'll get there, you'll understand. And you believe them because everything they've promised you so far has come true. Rank 3, clear. A hall in the organization, 200 people. They announce to you, your reactive mind is erased, you are clear. Applause, hugs, a photo for the wall. For 3 days, the world looks as if a film has been lifted from it. Colors are brighter, sounds are clearer. You can read people on the fly. This one has fear in their voice, that one has anger, and this one is lying. You arrive at a meeting with clients, a couple from Bel Air selling a house for $2.5 million, and you see that the wife wants to sell, while the husband is clinging on, not to the house, but to the marriage behind this sale. You speak with the husband separately, 10 minutes quietly and precisely, and by the end of the conversation, he signs. Your commission is $75,000. You get $25,000. After the ceremony, a man in his 50s, an OT5, approaches you. He owns a chain of clinics and is so calm, as if he knows something that renders everything the rest of us worry about unnecessary. He says quietly, "You think you've made it, but you haven't even started." He shakes his head and walks away. They explain to you, the levels of the operating thetan are the territory where the thetan ceases to depend on the body. The materials are classified, access is by invitation only. There are people who, after these levels, said they saw the room from above while actually being downstairs. You can't verify it. The penalty for every word spoken is $100,000. The only way is to get there yourself. Rank 4, Operating Thetan. The Solo Auditor course. You learn to work with the e-meter without an auditor, and it feels like a transition. Before, you were being guided. Now you're walking on your own. The first level of the Operating Thetan. You walk down Hollywood Boulevard among people, counting passers-by until you feel separate from your own body. By the 5th hour, you feel or think you feel, and by this point there's no difference. The third level, you're invited, and the invitation itself means you're ready for something most people on the planet will never be ready for. You sign a document where the church absolves itself of responsibility for the consequences to your body and mind, and you are led into a locked room with a folder on the table. You cannot take the materials out. You cannot copy them. You cannot discuss them with anyone, except those who have passed this level. You open it and read, 75 million years ago, a galactic ruler named Xenu gathered billions of beings, sent them to Earth, to the volcanoes, destroyed them with hydrogen bombs, and their souls coalesced into clusters and have lived in human bodies ever since. You close the folder, but they explain to you beforehand. The reactive mind will resist. The first reaction is disbelief, and it is precisely this disbelief that proves the material is genuine, because the body thetans do not want you to learn the truth about them. And you sit in a locked room and can't tell. Is this common sense or exactly the resistance they warned you about? There's no one to ask. The room is locked. You keep going. A few weeks later, you find a pressure point on your body, focus on it mentally, and something shifts, and the e-meter needle jumps. You realize that either this works or you've gone mad, and both options are equally plausible. The 5th, 6th, and 7th levels of the Operating Thetan involve years of daily work. You sit down at the instrument and search for sensations, pressure, heaviness, tingling. You mentally ask who you are, when you died. The needle responds. There are people who do this every day for 11 years. You were promised. When you finish, you'll be able to leave your body. And at the same time, your life on the outside is on the rise. You open your own real estate agency and clients come through the church. Scientologists buy from Scientologists. It's a network that works better than any marketing. By the time you're 30, you have a house in Los Feliz, a white Lexus, and a reputation as someone you can do business with. You donate generously to the church, not because they force you to, but because it gave you all this, and you believe there will be more at the next level. Rank 5, Patron. By the time you're 35, you're one of the major donors to the Los Angeles organization. You're invited to private events attended by company owners, producers, and lawyers, people whose names you've seen in magazines. You're given patron status. It's not a spiritual rank, it's a financial one, and it opens doors that aren't on any bridge chart. You dine with the people who manage the church's real estate, dozens of buildings around the world. And they tell you things no ordinary parishioner ever hears. How the legal structures are set up, how connections with city administrations work, how the church buys buildings in the centers of major cities for cash. You see the inner workings, and the inner workings aren't a sect of fanatics, but a corporation that operates more efficiently than any corporation you know. You invest $200,000 a year, and it's not a sacrifice, it's an investment. Because every dollar comes back in the form of contacts, deals, and referrals. The business grows because the network grows, and the network is the church. But there is another side. You learn about the Rehabilitation Project, an internal prison for the order's employees, black robes, running through the corridors, 12 hours of labor, food, whatever is left after everyone else has eaten. You learn that people who leave are labeled as disruptive personalities, and everyone they knew stops talking to them that very day. You know that auditing files, everything people shared in quiet rooms, are stored and used when necessary. You know this and you stay, not because you don't see it, but because the life you have is built on this foundation, and if you pull out the foundation, everything will collapse. Rank 6, Whale. By the time you're 40, you've invested over $1 million in the church. You're known by name at international events. You sit in the front row at annual meetings where the church leader announces new buildings and records. You're asked to help with special projects, and you help. You fund building renovations, cover legal expenses, and introduce the church to the right people. In return, you get things money can't buy: access to decision-makers, recommendations that open any door, and the reputation of someone backed by an organization with $1 billion in real estate. A reporter from a local newspaper starts digging into your ties to the church, and a week later stops because someone called her editor. You didn't ask, you weren't even told, you just noticed that the article didn't run. Your mother died 3 years ago, and you found out 4 months later. Your sister wrote to your old address, and the letter arrived at the office. You hadn't called your mother in 14 years. You sat in the kitchen of your home in Los Feliz, holding the envelope and thinking about the last time you heard her voice, when she said, "I'm worried about you," and you replied that she was an overbearing person. You put the envelope in your desk drawer and went to an evening event at the organization because the regional director was coming that night and you had to be there. Level 7, Passenger. The 8th level of the operating Dayton, the final existing level of the bridge, is completed exclusively aboard the ship Free Ones in the Caribbean Sea. You fly to Curaçao in business class, transfer to a speedboat, and 20 minutes later you see a white hull with a flag. On deck are those who have reached the end: business people, lawyers, clinic owners, people who have invested as much in the bridge as you have, or more. You pass a level, a review of all your past lives, a check to see which ones are real and which ones were planted by your reactive mind. You're told the result. Now you know who you're not, and the next step is to find out who you are. There are no superpowers. There's no out-of-body experience. There's no control over matter. There are 7 more levels on the bridge chart from the 9th to the 15th, but no one has ever seen them. They'll be released when all the churches in the world have grown to the right size, and the founder promised to return from his next life and finish writing them, but he died in 1986. You're 44. You have an agency, a house, a car, a reputation, money, and all of it grew out of the system you entered 22 years ago on Hollywood Boulevard. You're standing on the deck. The sun is setting behind Curaçao. The water is dark and still. If you leave, everyone you know will stop talking to you that very day. The clients who came through the church, and that's the majority, will leave. The business built on the network will collapse along with the network. Your auditing files, 22 years of confessions, lie in the archives, and you've seen how they're used. Down below, on the first deck, a new group is laughing. They've reached the 6th level of the operating Dayton, and you hear in their voices the impatience and confidence that behind the next door lies the very thing. You remember that feeling? You go down to your cabin, in the morning, a meeting, assigning tasks for the new quarter. At breakfast, one of the new arrivals, a guy of about 25, tanned with burning eyes, sits down next to you and asks what it's like to go all the way down the bridge. You're silent for a second, then say quietly, "You'll understand when you get there. It can't be put into words." He nods, and you see in his face what was in yours 22 years ago, the certainty that behind the next door lies the very thing for which it all began. You finish your coffee, get up, and head to the meeting.